everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're putting the finishing touches on our M8 armored car build. The model kit from O'Leary is completed, as are the 4 crewmen. Links to those videos below. But somehow it doesn't look finished. I like to set the model into a diorama base to give it a sense of scale or place in its miniature world. We'll start with a simple wooden plaque. You can purchase these at any big box craft stores. What we need to do is to lay out a rough guide of where we want the bits of terrain to be. My main feature is a dirt road, so we'll start that with a scrap of foam board. Removing the paper facings will help the foam not only stick to the wood better, but give us material that can be textured and cut down easily. And while we have the PVA glue out, let's create some vertical elements in the form of small hills or knolls. Again, I turn to using offcuts of insulation foam from other projects and glue them into their places. I like using simple techniques and everyday easily acquired materials to build my diorama bases, so hopefully you'll find this useful. All this gets set aside to dry overnight. Now that it's dry, we can start the texturing and shaping. Using a bit of sandpaper wrapped around a pencil, I can sand in some low profiles into the edge of the road and maybe some tire ruts. And I use this time to trim the excess foam back to the edge of the wooden base. Both the road surface, which is relatively flat, and the sides of the knolls, which I didn't bother getting pieces that fit flush because I knew I could cut them later. Because I know most of the non-road surfaces were going to be made into grassy areas, I decided to use thicker paper towels that I had on the bench, as opposed to going to getting tissue paper. I cut these into strips and soaked them in a 50-50-ish mixture of PVA and water. Then I just draped the glue-soaked paper over the foam forms to give the hill some organic shapes. This is very much like going back to grade school and playing with paper mache. You can even use the glue-soaked paper towels to create lower profile hills. Just be sure to add some glue to the base first and then bunch it up into an organic shape. While the glue and paper was still wet, I added more glue to the road surface and added some unsanded tile grout all over the base. Now this is something you may not have on hand, but I have like a 25-pound box that I bought when I started my model railroad to use as dirt. And I think it cost me like $20 or something. It's going to last a lifetime. I'll be handing it down to generations after me. As a last minute thought, I added some coarse ballast from Woodland Scenics. Since the ballast was just sitting on top of the grout and it wasn't looking wet enough to cure, I came back with some Scenic cement, which is just a highly diluted PVA glue. Surface tension was broken with a light misting of isopropyl alcohol before using a dropper to spread the glue. It looks kind of soupy and messy, but again, just let it sit overnight and the glue will dry crystal clear and everything will be locked in place. Now once it's dry, I did notice some spots that did not get the grout, mostly on the vertical surfaces. So I came back with my airbrush and some tan earth from Vallejo to pre-shade the ground cover and cover up any white spots. Again, this could be done with just a brush. Just make sure you dilute the paint down enough that it will spread into the cracks and won't go on glumpy. Now that all that is dry and cured, it's time for some static grass. I like to dilute the PVA with about 25% water. That way it's still thick enough that it'll sit on top of the surface, not soak in, but it's not so thick that it just makes a big blob. And I kind of dab it in place with a large brush. The first layer is fine coarse flocking as base. This will serve to hide the ground underneath the incoming longer static grass. So this gets spread around a large area, and I like to use something they call burnt grass. It gives the illusion of dead grass underneath the thriving green grass. Then it's just a matter of layering longer and longer grasses. I start with a 2mm light green, and I cover most of the flocking, say 85% of the flocking with it. And again, the static grass applicator, I know this is something you might not have, but this is a cheap one I bought on Amazon. This was followed by some 4mm medium green, and then some 7mm medium green, and finally some 12mm medium green. You put a little bit less coverage with each application, or in the case of the 7 and the 12, I put them in spots where I want to see higher grass. Noting that each application, I let the PVA glue dry about an hour to 2 hours, and the final drying was an overnight cure. Now once all this gets a chance to cure, that white glue again fades to to transparency and the grass is left standing in place. And here's the final look. While the static grass was drying, I took the opportunity to paint up some livestock, a mule and 2 French geese. All the animals are from an old Tamiya kit, number 35128. Only the mule is multi-parts. I think it has 2 body halves, the ears, tail, and the mane. That's 5. So it's got 5 parts. And everybody got primed, basically flat white. The mule was then sprayed with a 50-50 mixture of pale sand and light gray. This would be the light gray for his belly, legs, and eyes. It's kind of hard to see on the camera, but it'll show up in the final figure. For the dark brown of the mule's hide, I really have been enjoying this Noble Skin from Army Painter's speed paint range. And through an airbrush, you don't need to thin it, and it goes on silky smooth, like an ink. I did tape off the lower portions of the body, and I used blue tack around the eyes and the nose to keep those that light gray color. The other advantage of spraying the speed paint is that the layers are super thin, so they dry very quickly. After removing the masks, I soften up the hard edges with light sprays from the airbrush and a little bit of a soft brush. Once all that had dried and got to the shape and form that I liked, I came back with Vallejo's English uniform. It's a nice muddy brown color, and it's used mostly for highlighting. Things like the mule's mane, the tail, but generally all the high spots using a dry brushing technique. Around the face and eyes and anywhere there's like some musculature that you can see a deeper color. For the French geese, I left the white primer as is and added some Fire Giant orange speed paint for the bills. The body's got a thinned coat of graveyard gray, which is quite dark, almost black. I thinned it with speed paint medium because I really wanted it just in the recesses, and the speed paint medium will keep it from drying so quickly. This allowed me to come back with a dampened brush to pull off excess black to keep the top feathers as white as possible. And also not to let it pool places you don't want, because once it pools, it just kind of makes tide marks or coffee staining, and we don't want that. Lastly, once all that was dry, I came back with a surprising yellow color. It's called Malignant Green in the speed paint range, but it goes on kind of a yellowish green. So I used that for their feet because these ducks have yellow feet. And then everything got set aside to dry. With all the livestock done, it's time to come back to the base. I broke out the airbrush again and more of that tan earth just to touch up the dirt bits and to add a little bit to the grass. This kind of breaks up the all green and the different shades of green from the different manufacturers of grass that I used. The final touch is to add a little realistic water to the road drainage, like it rained a few days ago and there's some little puddles or wet spots left. This kind of is a reason why the geese will go there. They like water. So this will give me an excuse as to why the geese are on the diorama base. They'll be near the muddy parts. Now we just need some time to paint the base edge, which I'm going with a black, and then place the M8 scout vehicle, other soldiers, add the mule and the French geese, and voila, we're done. Here's the finished diorama. I hope you enjoyed the process of building this. It really is fairly simple. A little planning and adding some easy hills and a road with foam and paper mache, a few simple paints and static grass, and you're done. I would love to hear from my viewers on any techniques you use on your dioramas, or if you've tried out any of these and how they worked out. Until next time, happy hobbying.